Hi, good evening, everybody. So as you know by now, my name is Maryke. I'm a physiotherapist, and I am from sportsinjuryphysio.com, where you can get online physiotherapy consultations via Skype or Zoom. So tonight's topic is quite interesting. It's because it made me think. It's about what niggles or aches and pains can you train through? And I really had to sit and think about this topic because let's face it, some niggles you can definitely train through and they get better as you train, and others come back to bite you. And I couldn't quite figure out how I go about deciding it for myself. And it was useful to go through a process, and I identified 4 key things that I do to help me decide whether I should train or not. And I'm going to run through them tonight. Now, as always, if you've got any questions or you've got some experience of your own to share, please pop them in the comments. And if you're watching this on replay, feel free to comment and I will get back to you as soon as I see that. You're also always welcome to inbox me or direct message me. Good, so the first thing that I use to decide what niggles I can train through is the amount of pain or discomfort that I'm in. So that sounds a little bit obvious, but I kind of distinguish between a niggle and actual pain. So if I'm feeling pain or aching more than just something that I think I can feel a little bit, then I would really consider cross training. So if it's a proper ache or pain, think of doing activities that doesn't actually use that body part in the same way. So for instance, if you wake up in the morning and your calf feels really tender and sore, then going for a run may not be a good idea, but going for a bike ride or a swimming session, even though it uses the calf muscle, it doesn't put the same force through it. So rather choose activities like that. If, however, it's just a little bit of it's uncomfortable and you walk it off and it's not that bad, then I would give it a little go. But listen to the other 3 factors before you give it a go. So amount of pain is the first thing. If it's proper pain or an ache, cross train rather. If it just falls into the niggle category, then move on to number 2. My second thing that I use to decide whether I can train or not is that I test it a little bit. Now, I don't know if any of you have started a run with a niggle before and then it just disappears and you're actually fine afterwards. I always use the first kilometer of a training session to decide whether I'm going to train or not. And when I say the first kilometer, I also adapt my training. So for instance, I'm a runner, I enjoy running. So my training would mostly be I go out for a run. Now, if I had a speed session scheduled for that day or a hill session, something of high intensity, and I wake up with a niggle, I will likely not do a high intensity session. I would likely do a slightly easier session, and I would use that first kilometer to test it out. Cool, loads of people joining in. Hi Gemma, Eleanor, Sidders, I see you there as well. Good, so how do you test it? You do a gentle jog, and in that first kilometer you think about, is this niggle getting better, or is it actually getting worse, or is it just staying there? Now, if the answer is that it's getting worse, I would turn that run into a walk and probably head home and do some cross training. If, however, it gets better and it disappears, then you may be out of the woods, but I still won't do a hard session or a long session on it. I would first check for the 24-hour response, because a lot of things like tendon injuries, especially Achilles tendinosis that we spoke about last week, at the beginning, you can run it off and it actually feels better as you run, and it's only the next morning that you go, oh, now it's really achy. So if you get that 24-hour response where it is gradually getting more uncomfortable, then it's not a niggle that you should train on, and I would actually go and see a physio for a diagnosis and a treatment plan to get rid of it. Okay. Hi Tracy and Margaret as well. Hi guys, glad you could join us. Good. So to recap, the first 2 things is how much pain you've got or discomfort. If it's just a niggle, you can train. Second is test it, so just don't go into a full-on session, but in any case, reduce your session at the beginning. Do not go and do a hard session if you've got a niggle there. Now, the third thing that I do is you've got to identify the cause. And by cause, I actually refer to 2 things. One is the cause of the niggle, so which structure you've injured. And the second is what actually caused that structure to be injured. And that's important because depending on the structure that it is, some of them you want to be a little bit more careful of, while others you can just adapt things a little bit for. And if you know how you injured it with your, if it was training specifically or something to do with that, then you can mix your training up to not do the same thing. So I think it'll make more sense if I give you an example. Let me just quickly have a look here. For instance, my other half the other day had knee pain. Now, I can't even remember if it's his left or his right knee, but it was typical patellofemoral syndrome or runner's knee, where it's pain over the kneecap. And he got it because he was doing too many downhill runs or really steep downhills, hammering it. So the kneecap just said, don't like you. But the good news was that it only really hurt when he went downstairs or when he ran down hills. So he was able to mix his training up and still train at a relatively good speed on the flat and on grass. And the other thing that he did is I just told him to keep his stride shorter so that he didn't get that much impact. So by changing, because he knew what he'd done and what part of the training really affected it, he could adapt his training that he could still train with that, and it allowed him to get better. Another example, for instance, is, gosh, it's more than a year ago now, that I had tib post tendinopathy. Now, that is when the tendon that runs on the inside of your ankle gets tendinopathy in it. And it's because I have quite floppy feet that likes to pronate. And my trainers were too hard and I was running loads of downhills. So I overstrained it by doing that. So I could actually get away with training after the initial bit calmed down by running on a camber that naturally stopped my foot from turning in. So if you think of the shape of the road, if I ran on the side of the road where my foot was kept in a slight supination turned out, it took the strain off that tendon and I could actually go for a jog without aggravating it at all. But if I forgot and I ran on the other side where it increased that strain on it, then I really knew about it. So really listening to your body and figuring out which bits aggravates it can help you to still maintain training without making the injury worse and actually helping it to recover. Some injuries just won't allow you any training, so then cross-training, of course, is your option there. And then fourthly is, since you are injured, you may as well learn from every niggle you get. So what I want you to do is, instead of just feeling, I've got a niggle, I don't know why it is, sit down and think. So have a think about, look at your training schedule. So I hope all of you actually keep some sort of, either with a watch or some sort of idea of mileage or time you run in a week, so that you can see when you increase the mileage or the time that you've run very quickly, because that's useful when you develop niggles, that you can check over time, where did I actually go wrong? So whenever I get a niggle, I sit down and have a look at what training have I been doing? How much intensity stuff have I been doing? Have I allowed enough rest days? Have I done other things in my life? Like, for instance, did I do my normal long run and then spend hours on my legs so they didn't actually get to rest? Was there other things in my day-to-day activity? Like, for instance, did I have to spend a lot of time kneeling down because I was renovating the house or something, and that actually caused my knee pain? So go and have a think, because it doesn't have to be your sport that actually caused your niggle. It can just be the sport that's compounded the effect. And if you can identify those things, you can know to avoid it in the future, or adjust your training program so that you can avoid it in the future. But again, that goes hand in hand with the previous step, whereas if you identify those things, you can adjust your training that you can still train with it and not strain it. And then also another important part about learning from niggles is, if you get the same niggle again under the same circumstances, you can often decide with regards to how it reacted the previous time whether you should train or not. For instance, I have certain niggles that, again, I'm not very good with downhill running. So about 10 years back, I went and did a half marathon that was mostly downhill, and stupidly thought that, of course, I will be fit enough because it's all downhill, it's going to be easy. But I didn't even for a moment realize how knackered my legs would be. So I got what do you call it, groin strain from that. Now, the pain that I get from that groin when I annoy it, I really listen to. because that injury took a long time to recover. And I have previously ignored it when it's flared up and tried to train through it. And then I've just prolonged my recovery. So I may be a little bit overprotective and paranoid, but I found if I do listen to that and do the things that it likes me to do to get it better, and it's usually turned to cycling rather than running for a couple of weeks, then it disappears and I can actually regain my training much quicker. But if I ignore that niggle, then it's weeks and weeks and weeks of not training. So in that sense, it's really good to take note of how niggles react to what type of things you do. And that's really how I decide when I can train or not. Let me just have a quick look here. So Sidders is saying, a weird one. I was running touch at rugby, and this involved running in straight lines and stopping very quickly. I then got a dull ache down the outside of my right knee, lower leg, yet I can do all the Insanity Max workouts and not feel any discomfort to what I've done. That is a very interesting one. So Sidders, for that, I would also want to know, so it's on the outside of the leg, but you can do insanity workouts. And is it just hurting all day long? Is it with specific things that it's now hurting? Or is it only when you're doing that rugby start and stop that it's hurting? Yeah, it's an interesting one. You'd have to really do a full examination of that one to see what's going on. Oh, Tracy, I'm glad you're finding it useful. So guys, that's my recipe really. So to recap for the guys who joined us late, the 4 steps that I use is how much pain do I have? If it's classified as a pain or proper ache when I wake up with it or that I feel, then I'd cross-strain and do activities that doesn't actually strain that body part in the same way as the way that I did it. If it's just a niggle, I would test it. So I would definitely reduce my training session that I had for the next day. So no intensity stuff, easy run or easy cycle or easy whatever you do. And see, does it improve? Does it get better? Does it get worse within the first bit? If it gets worse, go cross-train or just give up for that day. If it gets better, then check the 24-hour response, because if it feels worse the next day, then you shouldn't be training on it either. Then identify the cause, so what you've injured in the first place, plus how you injured it, because then you can use that to adapt your training, that you can actually train while you're recovering. And then fourthly, learn from the niggle. Think about previous times you had it. Was it okay to train it or not? Okay. I've written all of this out in the blog post because I think it'll make more sense if you can see it there as well. Okay, Sidders, you're saying only with rugby. Then it has to be to do with the change in direction or the way that you're doing that movement. But yeah, I'm pretty sure I won't be able to diagnose this via Facebook for you. Excellent, guys. Let me know if you've got any questions. And remember, if you've got any specific injuries like Sidders has, then you guys can consult me via Skype or Zoom, where I can take you through a full-on examination and make you do loads of test movements, and we can come up with a treatment plan for you. Take care. Bye-bye. Thank you for watching. If you would like to learn more about preventing sports injuries, make sure you hit the subscribe button. See you next time.